Hello, this is Michaela Stokely doing learning response number 7 for crime and punishment. You asked us where does this leave us in regards of change in the criminal justice system, and just basically what we've been focusing all quarter, like how there's been impacts on the victims, there's been impacts on the people charged with the crimes as well, and there's been reasons for all of those changes and things that have been put on these people. Where does this leave us? I think that answering that question, it's just so broad that it's kind of hard, but like when I think about it, like change is possible because it has changed. Like the criminal justice has changed throughout the years, and it's possible that like things will get better. I don't know if they'll ever be perfect to the point where like racism and sexism and sexual assault and terrible things like that, horrific things like that occur within like the criminal justice system, like walls, like prisons and jails. I don't know if that will ever be perfected, just because it's such. I mean, humans have free will, right? So they're gonna do what they're gonna do, despite the law or not. And so those people who don't have a voice, like people of color or women or uneducated people, like sometimes they don't have a voice. So like if they were assaulted in the prison or if they were discriminated against, no one's gonna hear them because, well, first of all, if they're in prison, then no one really wants to hear them because they're not gonna, like, it's harder to be heard when you have limited restrictions and stuff. But especially if you're a minority or just someone who's oppressed because of their race or sex or whatever it is, their social class. It's hard because like that's, I don't know if that will ever change, but I want to say that it's going to get better because these things are becoming more popular and more normalized to talk about, at least in like Western culture, like in the North here. I guess I can't say the thing about the South because it's all happening in the South, like mostly. I've been thinking lately like what it would take to like change like what's going on in the South and stuff, and like how to change that. But like everyone that has all these opinions that are mostly from the South, it's because they grew up around thinking that that's true. Like they think that people of color are dangerous or bad. Like that's a stereotype in the South because that's just what they've grown up with. That's just what they believe. So like, and their parents taught them that everyone around them teaches them that. So I'm not giving anyone an excuse for thinking anything. I'm just saying like that's the reason behind it. So we need to change that reason. Like if I think people just need to go down to the source, which the source is that's just the environment they grew up around. They weren't born thinking that. They were taught that by elders or whatever, people around them. If something were to change, we'd have to start changing the new generation of children in the South, or like places where discrimination and bad things that happen within the criminal justice system, like things like that, like in Texas with immigrants crossing over too, in California and New York, places like that. If we are to educate the younger generation and the newer generations, then change will be possible because we're educating them as they're young when they're impressionable, and that way they're gonna grow up not always believing what everyone else is gonna say about it if they're educated about it. Because I grew up in a family that was always like, do never judge someone on their race, never judge someone on their gender, never judge anyone on their social class. If like I was even taught that if someone was mean to me, it was probably because they had something else going on at home. Like I was taught in a very loving family, so I grew up not thinking bad about anything and not believing stereotypes. But people in the South and all these people that are doing these terrible things in the criminal justice system most of them at least, grew up in a place where it was normal to discriminate against people and to kind of stomp on the minorities and the oppressed and basically keep them oppressed. You said, who should we prioritize when crafting change in the criminal justice system? That's another really hard thing because all quarter in this class and in my other classes, we have been kind of prioritizing the person that commits the crime. Like we've been kind of being like, this is not fair the way they're treated. Like they're like when I read Just Mercy for my for one of my other classes, which is about the death penalty and stuff. Like, there were just multiple instances where the author, he was trying to get people off the death row, and they would do terrible things, but there was always reasons that he would find, like, this guy's schizophrenic, and that's why he committed that crime. He shouldn't be put on death row, which I do not support death row at all. And it's crazy because, like, I didn't realize how much I should be focusing on the person that commits the crime rather than the victim, because, like, it's not okay the way these people are being treated no matter what crime they committed. It's not humane, and it's not fair either, and it shouldn't be allowed in the criminal justice system. But then you also think about, like, the victims themselves. Like, once you actually start looking at, like, that movie we watched, where it had all those various individuals who have been, like, either raped or robbed or beaten or something, or falsely accused of something, and it shows, like, their side, and, like, watching that is so heartbreaking, because, like, when you just look from the victim's point of view, you want to hate the person that committed that crime, and you don't want to give them an excuse for what they did. And sometimes there is no excuse, you know? And sometimes, like, just because maybe they had a really hard childhood, and so they didn't grow up, you know, around a loving family, so it made them hate someone. Like, sometimes that's not an excuse. Like, it's an understanding behind it, but it's not an excuse. So I don't really know how to answer that question. Who should we prioritize in crafting change? I think we definitely need to focus on the people who are committing the crimes and focus on how they're being treated, and, you know, kind of reform that. And the whole other thing that we had talked about this quarter was with the drug addicts going into prison for simply just doing drugs. They should be rehabilitated and not put in prison, and they should be treated the way they are. But I think it's also just important to, like, recognize that the people committing these crimes are victims too. Like, yeah, we do need to be focusing on the victims because they're the ones that are hurt, and their families are the ones that are going to be in pain, and they're the ones that had to suffer that loss or had to suffer that trauma or PTSD or whatever they ended up having to deal with after the crime was committed. But I think we need to have an equal balance of understanding, like, yes, there was a victim in this situation, and we need to take care of that, and they need justice for what happened to them. But we also need to recognize that the people committing these crimes, a lot of them are victims of something themselves. Either they're victims of oppression, they're victims of sexual assault in the past, or victims of being in really terrible families that maybe they were beat when they were a kid, or whatever it is. There's so many different things that could happen. The reason they committed that crime is probably because, like I keep saying, they are a victim of some crime. And then you ask what changes might benefit everyone involved, law enforcement, those charged with crimes. Like I was saying before, rehabilitation for people who go to prison because of being addicted to drugs, because that's definitely a mental health issue, and it shouldn't be a crime. Well, I mean, I can go in depth in that, because I'm sure some things that people do when they're on drugs they should be in prison for, but that's besides the point. It's a whole different conversation. Anyway, what other changes for law enforcement? Changes definitely just how, like, officers treat people and how they assume right away. Like, I mean, we've all seen those things on the news of white officer pulls out gun and shoots person of color when that person was just pulling out a phone or something and not a gun at all. That is something that definitely needs to be changed. I don't keep up much with white officers shooting black people as much as I probably should, so I actually don't know if there's a lot of changes going on yet. I know the last time I had checked and researched about it, there wasn't really anything being done, and officers were not being arrested for it or anything. Changes for those charged with crimes, definitely just better prison systems, better security, so because there's so much, like, sexual assault and beatings and murders that go on within prison walls, and like gangs that form too, like, that needs to change. So a better security, more cameras maybe, even though that's a breach of privacy. I think it's better just because there's more security and more safety for those people, so, like, they aren't getting hurt by other inmates or even guards. That happens too. What changes for crime victims? I don't know. Changes for crime victims. I think, you know what, I honestly don't know how to answer that, just because we didn't really focus. on all my classes, we don't really focus on the victims as much as we focus on the people that committed the crime. But if I were to think of what changes for the victims, I would just say, like, I don't know, maybe educate them on, like, why someone committed that crime. But then again, maybe not, because I don't know if understanding would help them grieve at all. Changes for the general public. Definitely just more education, more advocating, more telling people and spreading the word around that, like, what the actual, like, criminal justice system is. Because, like, yeah, a lot of it is bringing justice to people and helping people, but a lot of it is also just kind of bad and unfair and discriminatory and racist and sexist, and a lot of sexual assault and drugs and all horrific things happen with the criminal justice system. And a lot of changes need to be possible, and the only way they're going to be possible is if more people know about it, because that's going to create advocacy, and it's going to, people who have connections to like the criminal justice system in some way, they can help change too. I just want to say thank you so much for this class, and thank you so much for these assignments, because I feel like I have learned a lot from them, and just kind of talking constantly for nonstop, it's a nice learning technique. Okay, thank you.